Cool. We are live. Awesome. Okay. Hello. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is our creative conversation series, and I am here with Devin Graham. She's the founder of Creative Resurge, and I'm really excited to talk about what Creative Resurge is and what they do for artists. But first, I want to talk about Devin. So, Devin, do you want to start off by just kind of giving us a background on you? Where you went to school, what you majored in.
Totally. So, I always think this is like one of my favorite things to share with people because feels like forever ago, but when I was in high school, I got to take art history with Miss Deborah Waldorf, who has since retired, but she is the most incredible teacher. And I got to go to Europe a couple of summers in a row specifically to go study art history.
In high
Um,
school?
Yes, in high school with a
Wow.
number of really just incredible human beings and really incredible teachers. And so, including Brian Croker and just some really great influential people. And the reason I like to say that is because that's where I fell in love with it. Arts and art, like all these things, because growing up, I have always loved making art, but I have never felt like an artist was what I wanted to be necessarily. I always enjoyed it, but it was like hard for me to formulate that identity. And so then I discovered history of art. And so I went to UMKC to study that. And I always loved it because people are like, what are you going to do with that? Like, who gets an art history degree? You're never going to find a job. Like,
Yeah.
so, and so I love hearing that from people because it was like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so, actually I got a job while I was still in my undergrad with the Kemper Museum in Kansas City,
Mhm.
and stepped in as their museum educator at the time, and continued to fall in love with it. And then that actually exposed me more to the idea that people are still making art that is equally as valuable and equally as meaningful as everything I had read in history books. And so it was just this fun little journey there. But I am uh, thankful to still be very connected with the Kemper and still be teaching classes with them and things like that. And we can get more into that later. But after that, then I went to Johnson County Park and Recreation District, where I got to be involved in opening the Johnson County Arts and Heritage Center and establishing that program there, both in the exhibitions and the art education spaces and things like that. And during all of this, I was working on a master's kind of in the background. That seems to just be the run of my life. That will probably take me another 50 years. But there's so much value in education, but there's also value in learning along the way. So that's kind of a quick overview. And now I left the Arts and Heritage Center almost a year ago, like 9 months ago, and decided to embark on my own journey, which has been a really fun learning process, but it has also been honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made. So that's like a quick like 101.
5-minute spiel.
Yeah, it's like a quick
I like
thing,
it.
but yeah. So
So do
yeah.
you have a favorite era in history?
Oh, that's a good
Art?
question. Yeah. So I actually have, this is a weird question or a weird answer. I have an emphasis in my degree that is in the grotesque arts.
I love that.
And so it's funny because it has only come up a couple of times that I've needed to use that emphasis, but it's in the very like literally weird and gross and what makes it
Mhm.
art and that kind of thing. And I am failing my art history class right now because I can't remember the name of the artist or the piece, but there was a piece at the Kemper that I saw while I was in college that actually fell into that made me then want to navigate that. Oh my God, I love your cat
All
stuff.
right.
Um, just casually, it's like a snake. Um, but but there was a piece on view there that the artist had taken like 200 bars of soap. Okay. And she sent them out to all these people that she knew. And she asked them to use it for like a day or two and then have them send it back to her. And then she placed that soap inside tuna cans. And then all these tuna cans with this soap inside of it were displayed as one piece. They were just all touching each other, all next to each other in a nice little grid. And what was really bizarre about it, but I found it somehow intriguing, is that you could see like a hair or like that
Yeah.
bubbles from the soap, and it was all these things. And the idea was that it was touching on the humanness to all of us. Like, you know, we put on these fronts, so to speak, for certain settings. And it was like, but really, we don't know who used any of these. We
Mhm.
don't know in what circumstance they used it,
Right.
or how, or what that looked like. But ultimately, they all look very similar. And they, it was just this um, kind of interesting, just sort of bizarre moment for me, that it was like, oh, like that's intriguing. I'm going to dive into that. And then I found myself continuing to gravitate that while I was in school.
Cool. That's awesome.
It was really, it was fun.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've ever seen or heard of. You'll have to tell me the artist sometime.
I'll look it up and see if I can send it to you, because the other side to that too that I should share also is that I have found, as a as an artist myself, as a curator, as an arts educator, all these things, because, and we can get into that more, I feel like I wear many hats. Concept is what tends to stick out to me, is when something has like more thinking behind it and more you know, art for art's sake is a beautiful, incredible, important thing, 100%. But I've just always gravitated to like, well, you know, what's your thinking behind this? What does this mean? How can you take this a step further, and how can you be intentional with it? And
Mhm.
so that was another layer to why I got pulled that direction.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense because so jumping ahead a little bit, and this was what 2020 when you did the God, I always forget what it's called, the RRR,
Resilience,
reflection rebuilding. Oh my gosh.
remember the order, because I remember all of us who were involved in titling that struggled to get the right order.
I know. I need to get that in my brain. So I think I have to do a presentation on it soon. But anyway, so the resilience, reflection, rebuilding exhibition that was in response to the pandemic, and it was at the Arts and Heritage Center in 2020. Um, the reason that it ties in is because so not only did you curate the work, you curated it on the walls, and there was that line, the yellow line that went all the way through the middle of the walls in the gallery, and all of the pieces are touching the line somehow, right?
Yes.
You want to explain that a little bit more?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. So I loved that exhibit because which I've explained this when I'm working with artists and everything too, that one of my roles in the when I'm in the when I'm wearing the curator hat is if I'm not like making a single work of art or a series myself, that curatorial element is my work of art for me.
Mhm.
Like that is piecing together a work of art in some form or another. And so that one was really interesting because that yellow line was this idea that that's the ground, right? And it was intentionally placed at the traditional gallery hanging height, which is, you know, for us it was, I think it was at 62 inches, something like that. Um, and so we place that all around. And, you know, when you walk into a traditional gallery space, you usually see things kind of that centerfold line, and that's where things are.
Great.
Right. And so everything was offset to bother the audience. It was
Mhm.
intended to be uncomfortable and intended to look at it and like just be just slightly bothered by it, because all these pieces, they were touching the ground, but they were not grounded in any way. We were not in a place thinking about where we have been in response to this pandemic. We were not in a place that was okay. And so, or was normal, or was any of these things. And so it was trying to use the work, which by the way, was just the work that came through in response to the pandemic for that particular show was just breathtaking. I mean, and it wasn't even that like one particular piece was as much as it was that they spoke to each other in a way
Yeah.
that was really profound. It's one of my favorite shows I've gotten to work on to date. Um, and so, yeah, so it was just thinking about how can we take this a step further? How can we say this message a step further while also keeping in mind what the artists were trying to say or working through and everything like that? Because I think that that is equally, if not more important than what the curator's perspective is. And so it's balancing those things also.
Yeah. Do you ever so I know you've curated like multiple pieces from different artists, and I'm sure you've curated multiple pieces from the same artist in one show. In fact, I know you have because you did mine. But what's the process of like working with artists in that way, and kind of like, is it difficult to like tell them what to do with their work, or just, I don't know, like,
I think so much of it is it's balance, and it's also being willing to be upfront about what I see my role in, because there are a lot of curators out there and curators that I know personally that kind of you know, they want to lead the reins, and that's fine. That's their style. It's like a teaching philosophy. It's like, well, what's your approach or what's your learning style, to make that more univer- universal. And the way that I see my role is that, the artists have their thing to say, and it's very much a collaborative experience. But I think it, usually what I've done is explain that I'm trying to tell their story.
Mhm.
Artists tend to be almost like you're too close to it. You're too close to your work. Like you get naturally when you're creating pieces, and I'm saying this as an artist myself, it's like you see it being displayed a certain way, or that you've interacted with these pieces in such an intimate way that it's hard to see them like stepping back. And so I've always seen my role as being that, like, I'm going to step back and see how can I, knowing you as the artist, knowing your story, how can I then use these pieces to convey what you're trying to say in the best way possible? How can I make sure that that is stated, because it's the pieces speak to each other when you walk into a space, and I think a lot of people don't always think about that element. Um and so uh you're even when you're walking into a space, I think people come in and they'll want to see a certain piece, or they'll focus in on a piece they're walking in to see, but they don't realize that if those pieces were hung in a different way, they may be interacting with them differently. They
Right.
may have focused on a different one and get something completely different out of it. And so it's been good. I haven't run into any challenges ever by an artist in that sense. There have been other challenges, but not in the like how to approach that
Right.
element of it. So it's yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of working with artists, do you want to talk about creative research?
Yes. So it's really fun starting a business in a pandemic. Um
So much
Well,
joy in
I
your
know.
voice.
But, honestly, though, that's kinda where it came from.
Mhm.
So, I can't really go into creative research without going into some of my backstory, and so if it's okay, I'm gonna dive into that a little bit.
Yep.
Um, so my, oldest son, he, is the most incredible human being, my very, very best friend in this entire world. He's 7, and he has been that since he was born. And, so left. His biological dad was severely abusive, in physically, emotionally, sexually, everything that you can think of in a number of different ways. And um, I literally, when Oliver was 1 month old to the day, I left in the middle of the night because he was arrested for coming after me and Oliver. And I am in a place now that talking about that and talking about that in detail with anyone is actually more healing for me than avoiding it. I have found that confronting those things has helped me just give it less power.
Mhm.
I'm taking back the power by
Yeah.
just owning what it is, right? Well, right after I left that situation, I found myself living with my grandmother uh, and my mom, and I was working at the Kemper part time, and had this 1 month old that I didn't even know what to do with.
Mhm.
And because I was not a babysitter as a kid, so it was just,
Yeah.
he was fragile. And what do you do with that? Like I had no money, no plans, no anything. And um around 8 months later, I actually then met my now husband, who um literally just took us with open arms. He was just the best thing ever, and is still is. And he actually stepped up to the plate, so to speak, without me asking or like putting him in that position. Or in fact, I did everything I could to not put him in that position.
Yeah.
And during all of this, though, I was still very much dealing with a lot of the trauma related to everything I had experienced and where that left me and everything. And so there was one night that I got a piece of wood, and I've always been kind of a mixed media artist just because I like the tangibility of materials and not having the limitations of like I need to do this way. I like the freedom of it personally. And so I took photos of like before I met my husband, and then photos of which was tied to a lot of the trauma and the abuse and things like that. I've got text messages that I took pictures of that were abusive text messages and things like that. And then I've got took photos of when I after our life changed. And I use that along with wax, acrylic paint, and honestly, I don't even remember what else. It was just like other stuff that was.
Yeah.
And I spent the next 3 days intensely working on what turned out to be a large mixed media phoenix. And um, it literally is like all the ashes are images of the before. It's before I met my husband. It was like just all the trauma, anything tied to that is in all these ashes. And then the phoenix is all the now and all everything that came out of that. And this piece was profoundly therapeutic for me and impactful for me. I mean, I sorted through a lot in those 3 days. And
Mhm.
my husband said, he's like, I've never seen you like that before,
Yeah.
because it was just, I needed that. And so all of that to say, I then turned around, couple years later, we got married, and my husband actually adopted Oliver now. And then I was pregnant, and then I had a baby, and the pandemic hit a week later.
Yes, it did.
Oh.
Oh my
So- and
God.
so yeah. So where I'm going with all this, I'm going to get back to how I started Creative Resurge and where that came from and everything. And then what Creative Resurge uh, is it stirred up all this trauma, right? Because the pandemic's happening and I've got a baby. And at the same time, I found out that I have a heart condition that I have apparently had my whole life that I did not know about, but that it presents certain risks to me. And all of this, when I'm finding out that this virus is harming people, it's hurting people, it's killing people. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a young child, a newborn, literally a newborn,
Mhm.
and I am living with this heart condition, let alone just postpartum hormones,
Right.
everything else that comes with that. And then like, my job at the time, because I was still working at the Arts and Heritage Center at that point. And so all of this stirred all of this up. And some other things happened that led me to have to go back to work before my maternity leave was over. And it was just a really interesting almost a year following that just there were a lot of things that took place that it kept bringing back to this trauma surrounding the pandemic and having a baby at that time, and then trauma that I had years before. And I saw a meme on Facebook one day that was exploring like, hey, what are we turning to during this pandemic? Oh, like it's the arts. We're
Mhm.
watching Netflix, we're drawing again, we're painting again, we're listening to
Reading.
music, we're connecting in these ways that are all tied to the arts. And I kept thinking like, gosh, this is another resurgence. Like this is like our opportunity for us to show like that the arts hey, they do matter. Obviously they do matter, because what did we go to? That's what
Right.
we went to. And so that's where creative research came from. It's tied back to the phoenix and this idea, this like resurgence, which literally means for something to come again, like full force.
Mhm.
And so that's where the idea for creative research stemmed from, and the name of it and everything. Um, and you actually helped with that quite a bit when you sat down. And I was like, I have this idea.
Mhm.
Help me like just think through and brainstorm, and let's just sit down with a piece of paper and think about it.
Yeah, I mean, you already had all the ideas. I feel like I was just like, "Yeah, yes, uh-huh, yeah, do it, uh-huh."
It was wonderful though, and I will forever appreciate it. But then, it was like, okay, I know what I want to do. I know what I care about. I know where my priorities are, which seems to have been a theme over the last couple of years from a lot of people, I think, is what are our priorities. And that quickly evolved into, hey, like I want to support artists. Like that's what it comes down to. I don't want to be the artist. I enjoy being the artist, but I want to support artists in any way that I can. I want to um do these different things that I enjoy doing in a way that it can be functional, and not functional for people who are already established per se, though I am open to that, but more so for the artists who aren't sure how to even put themselves out there. How do I navigate this world or Kansas City or anything like that? And what do I even do? Because there are artists out there who maybe aren't known or aren't seen simply because they don't know, or they don't know what to do. And so that's where creative research was born, and it has evolved into curatorial practice and support. It's evolved into arts education components, um, different like uh, unusual things I didn't think would happen, but it's fallen into my lap, so it has happened. So it's like proofreading artist statements or artist grants and things like that. It's helping with um, I just recently finished a writing a forward for Catherine Kirkland, who's a phenomenal artist who has been, working on her own thing. And so it's all these things that I'm open to, and I'm letting it kind of evolve for itself, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
you've helped me many a time with grant proposals and project descriptions and
Well, and the funny part is, and my husband will be like, "What a nerd," is that I love doing that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, let me edit that. I'll edit that
good
for
at
you.
it.
Okay, sure,
Mhm.
here. And it's something that I thoroughly enjoy, because again, it's how do we prioritize? How do we uh, make, which this is going to end up being a natural segue into like burnout and stuff, but in order to be the best version of ourselves, to be able to provide the best whatever it is that we want to be. And maybe providing is just being present for your family. Maybe it's something to, giving back to the community. Maybe it's just feeling like you're doing really great at your job. Whatever it is for you, or being a good friend. It could be anything. um, you've got to find something you enjoy, and know where what those lines are and what that looks like, so that you can be your best self to do those things. And that's where my head has been since starting all of this, is I want to do what I really want to do, and in the way I want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Take
Don't we all
control.
want that?
Me too. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. And I also have to say, like, a huge, huge, huge 5 million shout out to my husband, because I literally could not have done this or made this very scary transition without him being like, yeah, you can do it.
Right. It's a
It'll be
huge
fine.
step. Yes, that support is critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
So let's talk about burnout.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's a
ugh.
people have to pay attention to it. Like, that's why I have been thinking about that so much. And, it just recently, like, okay, I started thinking about that even when first starting this business, because it's kind of a broad, vague, like, what do you actually do kind of thing. And it really is a mishmash. And I encourage anyone who wants to know more about creative research, please go to my website, because that will explain it way more than I can ever explain it.
Very nice
Um,
website.
Thank you. But I found myself in a place like right before the holidays where I just kept thinking, I was like, all of a sudden I found myself working till 2 a.m. and like not paying attention to my kids, and like my husband's finally home from his like 7-day a week job, and
Mhm.
like I still wasn't there because I was doing these other things, and it was getting to where it was no longer enjoy I wasn't enjoying it all of a sudden. It was like, this is part of why I transitioned, away from my previous job, was so that I could take back some of that control. And all of a sudden I found myself like, what's happening here? And so that actually evolved into our whole family getting hit with COVID over the holidays, which was a pain because it lasted for, kid you not, almost a month, and we're vaccinated and it still lasted that long. That I took that time just thinking about, like, gosh, you know, how important it is to be capable of putting the word no into your vocabulary. I've struggled with that my entire life.
Me
And I
too.
am finally in a place where I feel like I can say that in an okay way and it be okay. Prioritizing the things that you care about. Like, I have been very thankful and blessed to work with the Arts Council of Johnson County in a number of ways, like just volunteering and things like that, that it's like I care about that. I want to do that. I want my time to be spent that way. Supporting artists in ways that are more feasible for me. Um, that those are elements to it also. And so there's just, it's balancing those things because burnout's rough. I mean, it's like there are physical symptoms from it that I think people don't even realize, and it's capitalized right now because of the pandemic. Like, we're having pandemic fatigue
Mhm.
on top of just like normal burnout,
Right.
normal.
Life.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's just, I have just been doing so much thinking that it's like, okay, learning how to slow down. And even though you're starting a business, because that's the other thing that I have found is the case, because I wholeheartedly understand the, you got to give it your all and put like all this and everything like that. And it's like super intense in the beginning while you're getting it launched and all these things. And that is 1000% the case because I was there, like I've been there, except that I uh, took that moment with our friend COVID and decided that, like, wait a second, just because I'm starting a business, just because I am embarking on this endeavor to try to support the arts in these ways that I can, doesn't mean that I have to um, strain in this way in the process. Like, I can still maintain that control over what those boundaries are. I make a point when I'm working from home that when it is dinner time, I am not on my computer and I'm not on my phone doing work. Like when it's like when my husband gets home and we're ready to like have dinner with the kids and stuff, it's like, okay, I'm done for the evening. Or it's setting those boundaries, because without those, you'll literally work yourself 24/7 till you're just on in a really not great state.
Right. Yeah. And it's as simple as like checking your work email on your phone. Like that's something I struggle with. And I'm sure Sarah's like, don't check your phone, when on the weekends. She does it all the time. And it's true because if you have your work email on your phone, you get a notification, you're down the rabbit hole of you're now working on your weekend or on your time off. And you have to set those boundaries.
Right. Right, because otherwise they become blurred very easily. And that's what I have found, that I was just as a personal flaw, I was struggling with that because let me tell you, my entire life, like, I'll just say yes, and then I'll find a way to do it at my own sacrifice,
Right.
at my family sacrifice, honestly. Like, it was like and it's not that I wasn't prioritizing them per se, but I wasn't prioritizing them or myself in the way that really is the healthy way to do that. And
Mhm.
so I'm trying to, one of my goals, actually here in the coming months with Creative Resurge, is I'm going to be launching the blog component with it a little bit more. Um, Not necessarily like, in the kitschy blog sense, but
Yeah.
more in the sense that, like, maybe I can do some research, like maybe while I'm doing some research for myself to figure out how to deal with things like burnout, I could share it so that
Right.
other people and artists could benefit from that research that so
As a resource. Yeah.
yes, yes, and as a free resource, as a just a place to be there, because I think that the other thing that I have found is that there are a lot of resources out there for people and artists especially that simply aren't known about. Like, it's not people aren't aware that that's a thing, or, oh, I can do that, or, whatever it may be. And so if those can get streamlined a little more and become more accessible, then maybe that would help in a kind of roundabout way. Um, and then if an artist wants to dive into something more specific with and needs help with it, then I'm there to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. So can you get burnout from people?
Yes. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. And I think that that's like a misnomer too, because this is okay. I'm glad you brought this up. I was not sure how far to go into it or not. But one of the learning curves that I found this last, 6 to 9 months that I've been embarking on this is that when it comes to like clients and things like that, I have learned about myself that I love working with people. Like, working with people is one of my favorite things in the world to do. But I find it more challenging to work with people in the sense that I don't necessarily want to be in a position. Again, this is for me. There are many people who function completely differently
Mhm.
from this, but I don't want to be in a position where I am necessarily having to I'm not responsible to another person as far as deadlines go, to the same degree that many businesses take on clients. So it's like,
Right.
I want to be doing things that are more where I can be supportive and be helpful and everything, but it's not necessarily like this is going to be done on this hard date. It's going to be like, hey, like let me help you with that, and more of an organic sense. And so that goes back to boundaries too. It's because it's also protecting yourself. Like, I um have had client situations that have not been the best or healthiest relationship. And the thing that I think I see it all the time in like women's business groups and things like that, especially like on Facebook and stuff, that it's like, can I um draw those boundaries? Like, is that okay? And it's like, wait a second, you're running your own business, or as artists, like, you're running your own practice as an artist. Yeah, you can draw those boundaries. That is well within your scope. I'm like, like, I don't like doing Friday meetings personally.
Right.
That's just a thing, unless we're going to lunch or having
Mhm.
coffee and it's just like an organic, like, interactive thing, like, that's fine. But I don't want to make a decision on a Friday afternoon. Like,
Right.
I'm just not
Nobody
that
does.
person. I'll work on other things. Like, I'll work on the computer, or work on, website updates or whatever, or, getting this paper done or whatever it is. But like, it's a silly but important boundary that,
Yeah.
it's like you can save yourself heartache in the long run by simply drawing those lines now. And that's where I think a lot of people are afraid of that. And that's okay to do. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay to draw those boundaries, because I'm sure you've experienced, like, as an artist, that it's like knowing when to say no, knowing when to
Yeah.
say yes, and where to say, like, this isn't okay, like this, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I've made quite a few decisions that I completely regret because they've either like given away artwork or something. It ended up being like my absolute biggest regret in my life, like
Yeah,
what I wouldn't give to have that piece back, or, like my time doing something
right.
that really just, one, my heart's not in it, and two, am I really even getting anything out of it? Like, I set this boundary in high school. My high school photography teacher said, never do anything for free. And I feel like that's a really good boundary to set. There are obviously a few exceptions to where I will volunteer my time, or I'll, help someone out. Um, but and that's a whole nother topic. But especially in the pandemic, I feel like there's a lot of artists that are realizing that we deserve to be paid for our work, and we
Right.
deserve to be paid for our time.
Yes.
And you can't just ask us to do stuff for free.
Right. Right.
So, because
Well,
it causes burnout. I mean, you're not going to be able to do your creative career, your creative practice, if you're completely burnt out.
And that's essential when it's your soul, like you're,
Mhm.
people who are creative people in whatever capacity, like you're not doing that because you're going to make money. Like that's,
Right.
you're doing it because hopefully you will at some point, and you should absolutely, but the why is because you have a passion for it, you love it, you care about what you're doing. And the thing is if you do too much and aren't fairly compensated for it or appreciated for it, or you're saying yes to things that you really don't care about, that is where that burnout comes into play, because then all of a sudden you're going to not want to have anything to do with that, because
Right.
that's what I found myself doing. That I am such a nerd. I love grant writing. Okay. Okay. I love grant writing. I enjoy it. There's something about like the like game in it where it's like, I'm going to get this and like that
Mhm.
kind of thing, that I love doing it. But the timing over the last like 3 or 4 months, I was suddenly, as a one woman show, having multiple clients request multiple grants that were all due within like a day or two. And let me tell you, like I can do that. Like I can write a grant in that timeline
Mhm.
if that is what I am doing and I have all the information for it and that's all it is, and I'm not juggling these other things
Right.
and missing information and whatever it is. And so it's like all of a sudden I really hated grant writing. I mean, there was like a good couple months here in the last couple months that I hated it, which was very different for me. I know to a lot of people they're like, well, I don't like it.
Yeah.
but
It's
but
yeah.
but I love doing it. And I realized I was like, wait a second, like I need to restructure this. And so it's still an element that's happening with Creative Resurge, is a grant writing service, but I am still, before re-releasing that as a service, navigating like how can I make this more feasible so that it is again both serving the client in the best way possible, because I don't want to write a grant that they're not going to get. Like nobody
Right.
can do that.
Yeah, it's a waste of
I
everyone's
want them to get the
time.
money. I want to win. And
Mhm.
so I want to be that, but I've got to do it in a way that it's more manageable and not a burnout thing, not a all of a sudden I hate this thing that I've always loved. It's navigating that. And so it's just important, I think, also to take the time to reflect and recognize those things about yourself, because
Mhm.
I was getting really grumpy all of a sudden. Like I was really being a jerk around our house, that it was just like I found myself shutting down in a lot of different ways. And so it's just, I think there's so much value in self-preservation
Yeah.
and self-care, which self-care is not washing your hair
Thank you.
and like, it is a practice. It
Yeah.
is for some people, it's journaling. For some people, it's sketching and making art, or it's participating in a group theater co-op. I mean, it's like it is, you've got to have self-care that is more than a 5-minute band-aid, because
Yep.
it will not fix the bigger challenge there.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a super good point. And I think it's really important to emphasize also that there is a difference between being burnt out and working really, really hard. You know what I
Very.
mean? Like, as an example, um, I would say I've been an arts professional for 7 or 8 years. And pretty much up until 2020, when the pandemic hit, I never felt like I was like really hitting my stride. I was working really hard, but I didn't have those underlying boundaries. I didn't have that, the structure to my practice. And so I was getting burned out a lot. And then in 2020, when everybody was reevaluating, I also took a step back and said, okay, what is my creative practice? What am I doing? How does this feed into my job, my life, my relationships? And as soon as I did that, I started getting projects and I started getting clients and commissions. And like, it was so crazy. Like, the blinders just come up, like the door
Yes.
opens. And I've, it's been a very, very intense year or so because I've had project after project. Um, but I don't feel burnt out. Like, I don't feel like it's not worth my time. You know what I mean?
No, I totally know what you mean, because it's waking up it's literally that, it's that sensation. It's like, whoa, like I can see for the first time. And
Yeah.
the reason is too, though, is it's not the same thing as working really hard, because, there is value to that, but the burnout happens when you start saying yes to things that you don't necessarily care about in the same way you
Mhm.
do other things, when you like to appease other people at the sacrifice of yourself to appease somebody else. Because like one of the things that I run into, like I said, I do mixed media art just solely for myself, like no one sees this really, but I had someone ask me if I could like paint a portrait of
Mhm.
something for them. I'm like, I'm not that kind of art. Like,
Yeah.
I am not that artist. I am doing you a service by telling you that I'm not that artist,
Yeah,
because you'll be
absolutely.
sorely disappointed in what you receive. Well, 2 or 3 years ago, me would have been like, yeah, and then I would like make it happen. I would like have to rehash like
Yeah.
portraiture type
And
mentality.
it's
Like I'd start
the
looking at
most
pictures,
stressful
going
thing.
classes. Yeah, and like doing everything but I also would procrastinate until the last second, and then
Of
I'd have to
course,
get it done,
because
and then
it's not something you're super
right, because it's
passionate
not
about.
my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's not my thing, and so that's burnout. Like, that to me is burnout, where it's like, are you doing things that give in to your ultimate goal?
Right.
Like, I've been thinking a lot about that lately too. Like, I'm like, "Okay, what do I truly want out of this life? We've got one life to live. What do I really want out of it?" I'm like, "I really want to feel happy. I want to feel um like I am with my family, like that's really important to me. And I want to feel like the arts, which I deeply care about, matter.
Mhm.
That's my goal. Like that's my goal in life. And I decided that if something does not somehow cater to those things, then it's not for me. If
Yes.
it's not going to go toward that, like that
Right.
ultimate big picture abstract thing, like what do I want out of life? Because again, me a few years ago would have been like, I need to be the executive of this organization so that I can show how my background like aligns, like even with my master's degree, which is awful because it's important. But I quickly realized, especially as I have embarked on my own business venture, that I want that and I want to get that at some point. But at this point in time, when I have young kids and I'm starting a new business, like I'm partway through it, I'm like, okay, is this still serving this bigger purpose? Well, maybe I can take a break for that and get back to it when I do have the time and the energy and the wherewithal to make that a priority.
Right.
And so it's I think it's recognizing those things. Um and the other thing too is when there's conflict with anyone, let alone within your professional
Mhm.
life, uh, what was it that I saw? Oh, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
again, that contributes to that burnout where it's like you find yourself stressing about something that like how much does it matter that I am stressing about this, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Um
And I'm such a people pleaser and I want to help everybody and I want to do things for everybody, but it's almost like you have to, I mean, it's a goal setting. It's simple goal setting.
mhm,
And you need those 3 to 5 things, like you said, that make like that's what matter to you. And if relationships and if business ventures and if, you know, your art practice or whatever, if they don't check all of those boxes, then why are you worried about it? Like
exactly.
there is a time and place to explore things and to try new
Totally.
things. And
Totally.
yeah.
But you have to be in a place that you are not taking on too much, that's like you are in a position to be open to that, because it's like I've got other like smaller, like less life encompassing goals.
Mhm.
Absolutely, 100%. One of my big goals with Creative Research is I'm hoping that by next year that I can get a building. Like that's a
Mhm.
big goal for me. I want to have an art education space with a gallery space, and that's a huge goal for me. But am I out looking at buildings right now? Like no, because I recognize that I am not
Right.
in a place like to take something like that on, because I know that once I do that, like I'm going to want to be there all the time.
Right. Everything
Like,
changed.
yeah. And so it's like, okay, like I need to slow my roll. And this is all stemming because I'm a workaholic also. Like
Mhm.
I admit that. So it's my own personal flaw, but it's like, okay, like learning to also say not now if it's not a no, like that it's okay. You can
Yeah.
say, okay, this can come later because I know that I don't want to sacrifice these things to do that at this point in time, you know.
Right.
So it's seeing that too.
That's a huge, huge problem that I have
It's
is the whole not now thing
yeah.
because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an artist, but I've never been shown in a museum and I don't, like I have people who buy my work, but I don't have like people who collect, like collectors or like art agents, all those like
Yeah. No,
hot
I
words
totally get
that you throw around. I'm 25 years old. I mean, like,
what's your rush? Like,
why? Why
yeah,
am
yeah, like
I
why are you worrying about this?
this?
No, it's true. It's true. Which as a total sidebar, like when I win the lottery someday, I will be your collector because I love your work.
Thank you.
I just was telling her, I said, I was just like, I've got one of your pieces and it's a
It's
huge
so
piece
big.
that I am in love with that's in my house. And I was just like dusting it the other day. I was like, I looked over at Andrew. I was like, just so you know, if we ever come into a lot of money, I want Allison's work everywhere in our house.
Just paint
And he
murals
was
on
like,
all your walls.
whatever. Okay, yeah, it's great. He's like, yeah, I could live with that. This reminds me of Honduras. And I'm like,
Love it.
awesome, let's do
That's
this.
awesome.
So,
But yeah, I
um,
mean, like, I don't know, like, I
it,
follow this podcast, like, it's amazing. Anyway, that's not the point. But the point is, like, a lot of the people that she is interviewing are like older, mature, like professionals. Like, I have time. Like, I don't. I'm like, I've never been on her podcast before. Like,
right. Well, the natural thing though is to compare yourself, and it's like
yeah,
you're holding yourself to this thing, and it's like, why? It's like,
yeah,
because it's good. It's motivating in the sense that like it'll keep you. It's a good little like push to be like, oh, like I want to keep going with this, or I want to keep going
right,
on this project. But it's like, you know, you are have so much more going for you in so many of these ways that it's like, okay, like I need to just appreciate where I am now in life
exactly,
and appreciate this chapter in life because it won't always be, in another 5 years, like we're going to be in a completely different
right,
space. That's just the reality of life moving forward. um but it's hard not to do that though. Like it's hard
yeah,
not to let that like get in your head, because I struggle with that too, where it's like, oh, you know like for me it was like I I went from like going to school to working at the most amazing museum as the head of education to opening this amazing building and all these things, and now I'm home.
right,
It's like, and
right.
it's like, okay, like did I make a mistake somewhere in there? I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's like, well, wait a second, but I
According to
am. Like,
who?
this is where
Yeah,
I need to be in life right now. And I know in my heart of hearts that in, another year or two that like creative research is going to be in a different place, and it's going to be there. And it's recognizing the patience, which I have
yes.
struggled.
And that's those
Um,
long-term goals again. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, you need to make short-term goals, and there's a goal that you could probably hit in a couple months or a year, but there's also those goals that you have that are going to take 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
It's part of the thing.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, I could go on forever
I
about
know.
it's just,
So,
yeah.
no, you can keep going if you
Well,
have something.
I was just gonna say really quick, I hope that anybody who watches this at least gets this out of it, that it's okay to take the pause. It
Mhm.
is okay to say no. It is okay to say not right now. It is okay to say yes. It's okay to do what you need to do, but the important element being that you are not doing things to your own sacrifice.
Right.
Like I think that's the biggest thing, is just don't sacrifice yourself for something that isn't wildly important to you.
Right. Right. Yes. Your time is worth something. You
Yes.
were worth something, and you
And
need
artists
to.
should get paid.
Yes. Thank you. No. But yeah, I mean, there's that bottom line is if it's not worth it to you, you don't need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one's gonna no one's gonna yell at you.
Yeah.
I won't yell at anyone.
I won't either.
So, um, like, what are we talking about now? um, so I like the blog component. I think that'd be really cool. So when that happens, let me know.
I
If it
will.
happens.
It's more self-therapy. I don't even know if anybody would care to read it, but it's more so that I can stay like sane
Yeah,
between the other more like heavy projects kind of thing. Like
yeah.
that's kind of
It's
where
almost like journaling now. I mean, and people want to
it is.
know the behind the scenes and they want to know those quirky
It
stories,
is.
you
It
know?
is. Well, and I've debated like podcast style and stuff, and
Mhm.
like I worry that I'm gonna get too consumed with like editing and everything like
Mhm.
that because that takes time and all of that. And so I'm hoping to build to that. But I've got to the other element to all this is that um, like you said, like you can't compare yourself to where other people are who have already been at it for 10 or more
Right,
years. It's
right.
like you can't compare it to that. Or people who have already like established themselves in other ways. Because I struggle a lot like as a mom, realizing that like, you know, um, I'm comparing myself to people who may not have kids or that commitment that comes with that.
Right.
And moms can do amazing, incredible things, but I don't have the capacity as a mom to both be who I need to be for them and be doing this to this extent
Mhm.
at the same time at
Right.
this stage of life. I'm saying this because I have a 1-year-old who literally climbs everything.
Mhm.
And so every time I sit to do anything, it's like I'm stopping a severe accident from happening. Like, it's like, okay. And I've got boys. And so it's just, we're just that much more of a house. Everything's
Yeah.
growling and punching and wrestling. And, they're 7 and 1 and they
Mhm.
wrestle each other. And it's like,
Love it.
stop wounding me. And so it's just, it's recognizing those things about yourself that it's like, okay, like other people may be able to do that. And that's amazing and wonderful for them. But I recognize that that is not in my scope of personal uh, balancing abilities. And so it's seeing those things too. But
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for people to start learning about stuff that you're doing and using you as a resource. I think you're a really good resource. What do you have going on right now?
So right now, I mentioned just writing a forward for a book recently, and then there's an exhibition up at the Epstein Gallery that is called in Overland Park / Leawood. I think their address technically comes up as both when you Google
Oh,
it.
weird.
Inside Village Shalom, but
Yeah.
it's called Esperance and it is up through May. I highly encourage people to go see it. You do have to try to schedule an appointment just because the vulnerability of their community during this time is challenging. But that's going on. I personally, separate from Creative Resurge, and am teaching a handful of workshops for the Kemper Museum again. So it's nice to like return home, if you will,
Mhm.
because that was kind of my full circle. And so I love them over there. Um, and then I'm working with a couple of artists in a few different capacities related to their work and kind of as a advisor resource type
Yeah.
role. And so yeah, there's just kind of some behind the scenes things going on also, so it's good,
Cool.
it's all good.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, you mentioned you have a website, so people can go, it's just creativeresearch.com.
Yes.
Creativeresearch.com. You can see everything that Devin's up to, all of the services she offers. I don't know, are you currently grant writing?
Kind of.
I don't know if we need to get into
Yes,
this,
so
but
it's still listed on there, and if someone's interested in working with me on a grant, I think really the direction I'm going with it more so is like if someone needs help with a specific grant as opposed to I'm going to do all your grant writing for you. I think
Mhm.
that's kind of where I am at this point in time, and so I'm open to inquiries. I would love to work with people on especially artists themselves, like who are
Mhm.
needing some help with artist based grants. Like I'm please like let me help you, and it's because the other side of that too is it's so expensive to like get help for things like that. And I think that's
Yeah.
crazy. And so I try to work with people on that, like being mindful of like, I want dollars to stay in the artist's hand. I think that's just really important. Um, and so it's there, but it's just not there in the way it was. So
But
yeah.
yes, there are other things on the website you can look at too. There's the gallery, the online gallery space.
Which
Um,
which is in flux right now because I'm looking
okay,
for artists to
I
do
was
it.
gonna
So
say,
if anyone's interested, please, please, please reach out to me. You can do a contact through the website if you'd like, but it's a digital gallery space that's just meant to, again, just support for supporting. And so um, working through that. And then I also want to mention social media. And the reason I bring this up is because I would love for people to follow at Creative Resurge Art. But I should disclose that I have also learned through all of this that I am a terrible social media manager. I forget about it.
it's
I
hard.
stress about thinking of what to post, and then like when I do remember it, and like if I get a comment, I'm like, oh, what do I say? I gotta answer this. And
Exactly.
so I should disclose that I would love to have people follow because I do post when there is like an update or something I just want to share, that kind of thing. But don't necessarily compare it to social media gurus because it
Yeah,
will not be that. Like it's
that's
yeah.
okay. You post when you need to post,
I
and
I
when
will
you
get
post, it's
there.
important.
I will get there. And as soon as I
Yep.
can outsource it someday, I'm gonna outsource
Mhm.
it.
I feel
But
that.
that's okay. I'm okay with acknowledging that that is not my skill set.
Mhm.
And so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, is there anything else that you want to plug or talk about? I don't want to take your
I don't
entire afternoon.
I don't think so because I could talk to you forever, to
I
be
know
honest.
we could talk
Um,
for hours.
wait, let's keep talking. Just that artists should be paid.
Mhm.
And that as a community, if you cannot pay an artist or cannot feel like you cannot afford something, do what you can to support. That's that. I think that there is value in that also. If that's attending an event or just liking, commenting, that kind of stuff, because there are ways that you can support in an affordable way if that's the issue. And yeah, it's important. The arts matter. That's it. That's like my big life goal. Art matters, and everyone should think that. And that's the moral of the story.
Bottom line, if you
Yeah,
listen to none of this 57-minute
right,
spiel, get the last 30 seconds.
right,
Art matters.
right there. Art matters.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
that's a great place to end. All right. Well, I'm gonna take us off live. So thank you everybody for watching. And we'll see you next week with Scraps KC.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Glad you didn't hop off because I wanted to talk to you. I'm gonna turn
I
off.
always know.